Hello and welcome back. One of the things that we ended with on the last time is we have a number of these independent controls that we have out here. And as it gets to the point where we left off last time is we were checking to see if the email control was still valid or not. In this case, what I want to do is talk a little bit of how we can group those controls into that. Otherwise, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to type in a number of these different ifs, if this name is valid, if that is valid, and whatnot. And so we want to kind of have a way of grouping a lot of those things together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to now go and create a new state variable. So state, and I'm going to say, I'm just going to call it form group. And form group, and the type is going to be RS form group. And kind of like with controls, we're going to say it's a new form group to initialize it with. And we're going to initialize it with an array of controls. So what I can do is I can come up here and kind of copy out these controls that are up here. And then I'm going to come up this one, take this control, copy this guy, paste it in there, and so we have these different controls that are in there. So one of the things that I don't like is I don't like strings that we're going to be, and you'll see that in a second, but we're going to adjust that here in just a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and delete these controls out of there, and we're going to start getting some errors, which is okay, but let's go ahead and fix down here. What we're going to need to do is go to the form group, and we're looking for the control for name. So we're going to say get, and we would say string name. And when we'd update this, we're getting back a control, but we need to set the form group. So we're going to say set form group, and then what we're going to do is we're going to take the previous form group and we're going to clone it. The reason why we have to clone it is because React doesn't recognize that a group has changed if you're just changing the internal values of it. You need to actually, for a pure function program, you need to actually kind of make a copy of that object, structure, class, whatever it is, and then shove that into the setter for React to actually recognize this thing has changed, and so it needs to re-render. So we're going to say clone, and then we're going to say update off of that, and we're going to pass in that new control that was just handed there. So again, we've got the control, the updated control from the input. We're going to set the form group, first cloning it, and then updating it with the new value of the control. We could do the same down here. You could say form group.get email, and see, I don't even remember what it was, but I'm pretty sure it was email. And kind of the same thing, we're going to do this set form. And what's kind of nice is this is actually going to be exactly the same type of code here. So I'm going to paste that right there. And let me just kind of comment all this code out. Well, we'll leave that there. So one of the things that I was mentioning is I don't like using just kind of string text there, because if you come up here and maybe make a change and call this primary email, you don't get any code linting that tells you, hey, you've got a bug where you're going to pull the wrong value down there. So what I always recommend is you do an enum, and you just say like form keys, and you're going to type in name, and you just kind of give it now your text string, whatever it is. So name, capital, primary email, and such there. So key names in this case don't really matter a whole lot, but being consistent does. So I'll say form keys.name, I'll see form keys.primary email, and then if we use that down here, form keys.name, form keys.email, primary email. And so the great thing is if you actually do change it right here to emails, that will be reflected on all of them and it'll stay consistent. So with that there, we have those being updated. Let's go here now and see how we can change this validation. So what we can do now is we can say form group dot validate, or I think it's is valid, and I can pass it in. I might have too many parentheses there. Yep. So invalid form, do not proceed. We can spit that out right there. Now here's the one thing is, again, when we call the form group and we're checking to see whether it's valid or not, that actually is going to internally modify this instance of this form group. And so what we'll want to do is, before returning, if we want to see those errors show up on the inputs, we're going to need to do the set form group again of this form group, cloning it, so we can kind of see those changes there. So to restate, is valid is going to loop through every single control it has, checking to see whether it's currently valid or not, setting a valid flag and an error inside, which is whatever error we specified there, and then spitting it out. For example, we could add another validator here, new RS validator, RS validation, and say that this is required. This is a required input. So we could say name is required, and we do all that. And let's comment this out for the second. And console, let me just say it's valid. All right, all those changes. Let's finally go back to the screen. If I hit submit just right away, we get name is required, invalid email. We also say down here, invalid form, do not proceed. So I could put in the name of Jim and do jim@jones.com, hit enter. The form is now valid and it's able to proceed. So how do you get the values out of the form, you might ask? There's a couple different ways. One is the manual way of getting it one control at a time. So what we're going to do is we're going to come to the form group right here and say get, and we're going to have the form keys.name, and we could get, and now we have that actual control that was there before. We can do the same thing here and see nice how this auto completes now with the enum that we have here. And now we're back to printing it out. Let's go and test it. jim@jimmy.com. And so there we have it. We have our values that are out there. So that's one way of getting your form values. Second way is to call, let me just leave that right there. I'm just going to say form group dot to a model. And so that will return an object. So let form values equals this. And that's an object of all those values in there with the keys of the object, whatever values you have here. So name, primary, email. The challenge with this is that if I say, let me take this here. If I say console.log form values, that'll work and we'll get our values out there. But if I was trying to individually log them, form values dot, we don't get an autocomplete. We don't get a name or a primary email or any of that kind of stuff. The IDE is trying its best to guess, but it just doesn't really know what it is. And you can get in TypeScript, you'll get some unknown. So the way we do that is we can actually use, in TypeScript, they're called generics. It's almost like a template of what the values are back that you expect. And so in this case, we're going to expect to get back a name as a string and a primary email as a string. And so if we come now here, we can see we get our autocomplete. So we can console log our name and our primary email. Let me take these ones out and I will just log out this, and let's try here. Tommy@tom.com, hit enter, and there we go. We have them separated out. It looks all good. If we mess up our email and try to hit submit, invalid form, all that stuff, really great. You might ask yourself, well, that's great. One better way of doing this is, let's cut this thing out here. Let's do an interface up here and call it form model and paste those in. and run prettier, so it formats. And now we'll use form model down here. So this way, at least when somebody's going through code and if they see they're going to change primary email, they kind of want to keep these lockstep with each other. So if they just change this back to email, they'll want to change email down here. And now TypeScript warns us, hey, I don't know what a primary email is. Autocomplete email, and it's all good. Okay, so the last thing I want to do is kind of show some of the other benefits that you get with a form group. And that is you have a number of different functions you can call in the form group. So let's say I want to reset the form at a certain point. So maybe what we'll do is we'll add a button down here, another button, and we're going to add a reset. I'm going to take off type because it's not a submit, and we'll do an outline, maybe secondary on this guy, and we'll change this to handle reset. And since we don't have that, we're going to create that function, and what we're going to do is we're going to say let updated form, or maybe reset form, equals, since again you want to keep everything pure functional programming, we're going to clone this guy, and then we're going to call reset to initial value on it. And then I'm going to set that back in to reset form, and that should cause the form to kind of reset back to its initial values when you originally created it. You might ask, what were the initial values? Well, they're whatever you passed in up here when you created the initial form. So we do that. We have that. So one thing I want to do is add a little bit of maybe a gap between the buttons, so maybe like a 24 pixel gap, and I think that should do it. So let's see what it looks like. Name, Jim, email, and if I hit reset, boom, it just kind of cleared out the form right there. So reset's one of the kind of extra things you get. Submit, cloning, controlling. But the main thing is you get a better way of controlling many inputs in a nice, easy package. So I think that's it for now that we're going to cover. Let us know if you have any questions, but hopefully this was helpful. Thanks.